I never thought a dirty plate would end a friendship. But there I was, standing in the middle of our tiny apartment kitchen, staring at Ethan as he shoved his charger into a duffel bag like it had personally offended him. My heart was pounding. Not from panic, but from something colder. Something that felt like detachment. And maybe a little relief. He didn't look at me as he said it. "You're too messy. I'm moving out." No warning, no conversation, just those 7 words. His voice was sharp, clipped, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror before walking in. I remember the way he adjusted his watch right after, like he was about to leave for a meeting and not walk out of my life. My hands trembled as I clenched my phone, the screen still glowing from the text I never got to finish. I wanted to say something. Fight back, beg, maybe. But instead, I heard myself say calmly, "I understand." And I meant it. That surprised me the most. The room was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of car horns drifting up from the street below. Even the air felt tense, like it had absorbed all our unspoken resentment and didn't know where to put it. Ethan paused, like he was waiting for me to blow up. Maybe he wanted me to. Maybe that would have made him feel justified. But when I didn't, when I just stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, arms crossed, eyes steady, he looked confused. For a split second, I caught it, the flicker of guilt in his eyes. But he buried it fast. "Look, man, it's not personal," he said, avoiding my gaze as he zipped up his bag. "It's just, we live differently. You're kind of all over the place. I can't do it anymore." All over the place. I swallowed hard, feeling those words sting more than I expected. I wasn't filthy. I wasn't a slob. But yeah, I left stuff out sometimes. My editing gear, my notebooks, the occasional takeout box when deadlines piled up. It wasn't perfect, but it was lived in. It was mine. Still, he'd made up his mind. And weirdly, I didn't want to change it. As he walked towards the door, I caught a glimpse of his reflection in the hallway mirror. His jaw was tight, expression unreadable. Mine, on the other hand, was calm. Eerily so. My face didn't match the chaos inside my chest. Because here's the truth. Deep down, I knew this day was coming. For months, I'd felt it building. The way he sighed when I came home late. The way he'd wipe the counter right after I used it. The not-so-subtle, "maybe you should hire a cleaner" jokes. It was always there, under the surface. I used to blame myself. Thought maybe I wasn't enough. Wasn't mature enough, clean enough, whatever enough he needed. But standing there, watching him leave, I realized something. It wasn't about the mess. Not really. It was about control. His need for things to be exactly how he wanted them, and his belief that I was just an inconvenience getting in the way of his perfect space. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The door clicked shut behind him, no dramatic slamming, just a quiet finality. I stood there for a long time after he left. Let the silence settle. My breath came slow and steady now, like my body knew the storm had passed, even if I was still drenched from standing in it. I walked back to the living room, glanced around at the apartment. My apartment now, I guess. It looked the same, but it felt different. Like a weight had been lifted, or maybe just shifted. My eyes landed on his empty room. The bed was still made, the blinds half closed, a faint trail of his cologne lingering in the air. I didn't know what I was going to do with the space yet, but something inside me whispered, "Make it count." I had no idea then just how much that room would change everything. But what I did next? Let's just say, he couldn't believe it. It's strange how you can live somewhere for over a year and never really feel like it's yours. That apartment, our apartment, was in the heart of Chicago, tucked above a tired-looking coffee shop, with a busted neon sign that flickered at night like it couldn't decide whether to keep trying or just give up. I always related to it. When Ethan and I moved in together, it made sense at the time. We'd known each other through a mutual friend, grabbed beers a few times, talked about music, politics, the usual. He worked in corporate finance, wore button-downs even on Saturdays. I was a freelance video editor, mostly self-taught, doing gigs for small brands and indie creators. Our lifestyles? Very different. But we got along. Or at least I thought we did. I was 28 when we signed the lease, fresh off a breakup, low on savings, and just looking for stability. Ethan had just gotten a promotion. He needed a roommate fast, and I needed somewhere that wouldn't eat my entire income. It was practical, comfortable even. At first, it worked. We had our routines. I stayed up late working. He went to bed early and woke up at 6 a.m. to run before work. We didn't hang out much, but we were polite, cordial even. He made coffee every morning and left a cup for me. I appreciated that. But over time, the cracks started to show. Ethan was meticulous. His shirts were color-coded in the closet. The spice rack was alphabetized. He vacuumed every Tuesday and expected me to do the same. And me? I wasn't dirty, but I was chaotic in that creative kind of way. I'd leave sticky notes all over the counter with editing ideas, scribbled drawings of video transitions, half-drunk cups of coffee I meant to finish. He never yelled. That would have been easier, honestly. Instead, he sighed. The kind of sigh that made you feel like you were the disappointment. I'd find little passive-aggressive notes sometimes. Don't forget the recycling. Or, please rinse the sink after shaving. Always with that damn smiley face. I started to shrink. I'd tiptoe in at night, afraid the sound of my keys would annoy him. I'd hide my notebooks in drawers so he wouldn't see them. I stopped playing music out loud. I told myself it was about being considerate. But really, I was slowly erasing myself. Still, I stayed. Because rent was cheap, the location was perfect, and a part of me thought, it's not that bad. He's not screaming. He's not throwing things. Maybe I'm the problem. I was used to making myself smaller. That's a skill you learn when you grow up in a household where emotions aren't safe. So when he told me he was moving out, my first emotion wasn't shock. It was guilt. I felt like I'd failed at being a good roommate, like I'd broken some invisible rule I didn't know existed. But as I stood in that now half-empty apartment, something shifted. I realized that for the first time in over a year, I could breathe. There was space, not just physical space, though, yeah, his absence left a gaping emptiness in the hallway, but emotional space. Silence that didn't feel judgmental. Rooms that didn't carry tension. It was like I could finally hear myself think. I walked into his old room the next morning. The blinds were still drawn. A dust ring outlined where his dresser used to be. On the windowsill, he'd left a key. Not a word. No note. Just that one final key. I held it in my hand and stared at it for a long time. It was like holding the last piece of someone who was never really present to begin with. And then it hit me. This room didn't have to stay empty. I didn't have to fill it with someone else's rules again. I could do something different. I didn't know exactly what, not yet. But there was a flicker of possibility, like a match striking in the dark. What if this space could work for me, for my future? That night, I opened my laptop and typed, "How to turn a bedroom into a short-term rental." And just like that, the next chapter began. Turning Ethan's old room into a short-term rental wasn't some bold, confident move. It was a desperate experiment. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my friends, not my parents, not even the few clients I still edited videos for. I was scared they'd think I was nuts, trying to become some kind of Airbnb mogul with zero experience and a room that still smelled faintly like overpriced cologne and condescension. But I needed to do something. Rent was due in 3 weeks, and I couldn't cover the full amount alone. At first, I tried to keep things simple. I moved Ethan's old bed to the corner, scrubbed every inch of the room like I was erasing his presence one Clorox wipe at a time. I rearranged the furniture to make it feel warmer, less sterile. I brought in a floor lamp from the living room, added a cheap but cozy rug, hung up some prints I'd made from my drone photography. Still, the room felt hollow, like a stage set waiting for a character to walk in. I took a deep breath and listed it. One blurry iPhone photo, one shaky caption. Sunny room in a creative home. Quiet, close to public transit. I stared at the screen after clicking publish, heart pounding like I'd just sent a love letter to a stranger. And then, nothing. For days. Every morning I'd open my email with that flicker of hope. Maybe someone had booked. Maybe this wasn't a stupid idea. And every morning the inbox stared back at me. Empty. Mocking. Self-doubt crept in fast. I'd lie in bed at night, eyes wide open, wondering if I was just grasping at straws, pretending I could be something I wasn't. Entrepreneur? Please. I was barely keeping my freelance gigs alive. Then came the texts, from friends who had heard Ethan moved out. Little probing questions. So, you looking for a new roommate? Want me to ask around? I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to explain. Tell them I had a plan. But I didn't. Not really. So I just said I was figuring it out, which felt like code for I'm barely holding it together. His setup? Practically identical to mine. Simple bedroom, decent lighting, a little creativity, but what stood out was his strategy. Great photos, fast replies, a story that made guests want to stay. I stayed up until 3 a.m. redoing my listing. Took new photos with my DSLR, lit the room with soft white bulbs and natural sunlight. I wrote a new description, not just about the room, but about me. My story. How I was a creator trying to build something real. I didn't hide it anymore. Then I waited. Again. This time it took 12 hours. I remember it clearly. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed. New booking. 3 nights, $225. I literally dropped my toothbrush into the sink. I stared at the screen, foam still in my mouth, and laughed out loud. This half-crazy, half-relieved sound that echoed through the empty apartment. But here's the thing. As soon as that first booking came in, so did the pressure. The guest was arriving in 2 days. The room still needed blackout curtains, towels, a spare key. I panicked, ran to Target with my last $70 in cash, bought the cheapest set of matching linens I could find. Spent the next 24 hours prepping like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it kind of did. I was so afraid something would go wrong, that the guest would hate it, that they'd write a terrible review and ruin everything before it even started. I cleaned the bathroom 3 times. I practiced how I'd greet them. I even Googled how to fold towels like a hotel. The night before they arrived, I sat on the couch with a beer and stared at the door to the guest room. My foot was bouncing uncontrollably. I couldn't sit still. What if this didn't work? What if this was just a fluke? But then, another thought whispered in the back of my mind. Something I hadn't let myself believe in a long time. What if it did work? What if this was just the beginning? And right then, I knew. The conflict wasn't Ethan leaving. It was me finally deciding if I believed in myself. I still remember the sound of her suitcase wheels rolling across the hardwood floor. My first guest, Mia, was a travel nurse. She smiled the second I opened the door. Tired eyes, but kind. She said the place looked even better than the pictures. And in that moment, I swear I almost teared up. I had spent the entire day double-checking every detail. Fresh towels folded like hotel swans, a tiny snack basket on the nightstand, a welcome note scribbled on cardstock I found buried in my desk drawer. It felt like I was hosting someone in a version of my life I was still growing into. Someone who wasn't just getting by, but creating something worthwhile. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room staring at the closed door to the guest room. It hit me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about agency. I had made something. I had created a space people wanted to be in, and I hadn't asked anyone's permission. For the first time in a long time, I felt something bigger than relief. I felt possibility. So I decided. No half measures, no fallback plans. I was going all in. I'd turn this side hustle into real income. I'd figure out how to do it better than anyone else in my building. Hell, maybe better than anyone in my zip code. That week, I dove in head first. I binge-watched every video about short-term rental optimization. I joined Facebook groups filled with hosts swapping horror stories and hacks. I started tracking trends, reading reviews on other listings in my area, and tweaking every inch of my setup. Little things made a huge difference. I added a mini coffee station with a $30 Keurig. I bought blackout curtains because Mia mentioned she worked night shifts. I placed a full-length mirror near the window and watched my next guest complement the natural lighting. I didn't have money, but I had attention to detail. And in this game, that mattered. The bookings kept coming. A couple from Denver, a graduate student in town for a weekend seminar, a photographer doing a shoot for a local brand. People I never would have crossed paths with were walking through my door, sleeping in a room I had transformed from an empty shell into something welcoming, purposeful. I started earning more per week than Ethan ever paid in rent. That part still blows my mind. But it wasn't just about the number in my bank account. It was about the shift inside me, the confidence, the belief that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life that didn't feel like compromise. I remember sitting on the couch one night, legs tucked under me, a guest's review glowing on my screen. Felt like home. Josh was thoughtful and responsive. Would 100% stay again. I read it twice, 3 times, and then I laughed. The guy who used to walk around his own apartment feeling like a guest in someone else's space was now getting paid to make other people feel at home. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more surreal, I got a message I didn't expect. It was Ethan. His name flashed across my screen like a ghost. For a moment, I just stared at it. I hadn't heard from him in months. The last words he'd spoken to me were about my messiness, about how he couldn't take it anymore. His message was short. Hey, I left a couple things in the closet. Mind if I swing by sometime this week to grab them? That was it. No, how have you been? No curiosity about what I'd done with the place. But part of me smiled, because he had no idea. No idea that the room he left behind had become a source of independence. That the person he dismissed as too messy had turned that so-called mess into a business, a mindset, a new version of himself. I replied, "Sure, just let me know when." I kept it polite, calm, because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to him, not to anyone. All I needed now was to keep building. And what happened when he finally came back to see it? Well, that was a moment I'll never forget. He texted on a Wednesday. "Hey man, I can come by Saturday afternoon if that works. Just want to grab a couple boxes from the closet." It was so casual, like he was dropping by a coffee shop. No apology, no curiosity, no idea. I stared at the message for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. My first instinct was to hit him with something clever, something that hinted at the truth, that I was thriving, that the space he gave up had become something he never saw coming. But I didn't. Instead, I typed, "Saturday works. Just shoot me a text when you're outside." I wanted him to see it with his own eyes. The day came faster than I expected. I cleaned the place again, not because I wanted to impress him, but because I wanted it to reflect what it had become. A space filled with intention. That morning, the guest who had stayed for the week, a musician touring the Midwest, checked out and left a glowing review. Clean, artistic, peaceful vibe. Josh was amazing. Loved the personal touches. I smiled as I read it, then turned my focus to resetting the room. New sheets, fluffed pillows, lavender spray on the windowsill. I adjusted the reading lamp angle, straightened the framed print above the bed, and folded a towel set just so. I wanted it to feel warm. Alive, completely unrecognizable from the stale, sterile room Ethan used to shut himself away in. At 1:16 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Here." I opened the door slowly. There he was. Same guy, but something was different. His shoulders were a little hunched, maybe from the winter chill, maybe from something else. "Hey," he said, eyes flicking past me into the apartment. "Place looks good." I stepped aside, motioning him in. "Thanks, it's been busy." He nodded vaguely, heading straight for his old room. He hesitated at the doorway. His hand rested on the frame, eyes scanning the space like it didn't register. I watched his jaw tighten. "Whoa," he muttered. He stepped inside. The lighting was soft, golden from the sunlight filtering through the curtains. The bed was made. A guest journal lay on the desk, open to a page where someone had doodled a thank you note. He turned around slowly. "You renting this out?" His voice was quieter now, almost unsure. I nodded. "Yeah, it's been going really well." His eyes landed on the welcome basket I had restocked just that morning. Then on the little list of local restaurant recommendations framed on the wall. "Like Airbnb?" he asked. I nodded again. Calm, steady. "Yep, been booked solid for the last couple months." He looked at me, then looked around again, like the walls might answer a question he didn't know how to ask. "Damn," he finally said. "You're really doing this?" I could have said a lot in that moment. Could have reminded him how he walked out thinking I was too messy to function. Could have listed all the things I'd learned, the hustle it took, the late nights, the trial and error. But I didn't. I just smiled a little and said, "Yeah, I am." He blinked, nodded. His eyes dropped for a second. I saw it again. That flicker. Not guilt, exactly. Something closer to disbelief. A kind of reckoning with the fact that he had been so sure, and he had been so wrong. He grabbed his 2 boxes from the closet without another word. I walked him to the door. As he stepped out, he paused. "Guess it all worked out for you, huh?" It wasn't said with spite. More like someone trying to make peace with a version of reality they hadn't accounted for. I shrugged. "Yeah, it did." And then I closed the door behind him. Not dramatically, not with any sense of revenge, just quietly. Finally. I turned back to the space, the warm light still spilling into the hallway, the faint scent of lavender in the air. And I felt it. Peace. Like I had just finished a chapter in a book that was never really about him. He had walked away thinking he was cutting me loose. But in reality, he'd set me free. The door clicked shut behind him, and that was it. Ethan was gone. For real this time. I stood there for a moment, listening to the stillness. It was quiet, but not empty. The air didn't feel tense anymore. It felt mine. I sat down on the edge of the guest bed and ran my fingers along the comforter, freshly tucked and perfectly smooth. This room had seen so many people in such a short time. Nurses, artists, musicians, Students, even a father visiting his kid for the first time in years, and every single one of them had felt something here. Peace, safety, home. Funny, isn't it? The very room Ethan dismissed as too messy to share had become something more valuable than I ever imagined. But the real transformation wasn't the space. It was me. For so long, I let other people define my worth, quietly adjusting myself to keep the peace, apologizing for existing in my own way. I thought if I could just make myself smaller, neater, easier to live with, I'd be accepted. I'd be enough. But the truth is, I was never too messy. I was just too different for someone who didn't understand me. And that's okay. Ethan needed things a certain way. That doesn't make him a villain. It just means we weren't compatible. The real issue was me believing that his version of right had to become mine. I gave up parts of myself to fit into someone else's mold. And for what? Comfort? Validation? It wasn't worth it. When he walked out, I didn't chase him. I didn't beg. Because something deep down told me this is the opportunity you didn't know you needed. And that whisper was right. Since that day, I've hosted over 40 guests. Some stayed for a night, some for weeks. They left behind handwritten notes, warm reviews, and stories that reminded me why I started this in the first place. One guest wrote, "Thank you for creating a space that feels like more than just a bed. It felt like healing." That line stuck with me, because healing isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, it's subtle. It's something you don't notice at first, like the way the light hits a wall differently in the morning, or how silence no longer feels heavy, just still. I didn't just turn a room into a rental. I turned it into a reset, for me and for the people who passed through. People ask me now if I'll ever get another roommate. Honestly, I don't think I could. Not because I'm bitter, not because I need the money, but because I've learned the value of having space to just be myself. Fully, unapologetically, creatively, messily. This apartment may still have takeout boxes on editing days. My notebooks still end up on the kitchen table. But it's mine. It's lived in. And for the first time, I'm not sorry about that. I also started documenting my journey, sharing tips online, helping other creatives see what's possible even when they feel stuck or underestimated. People reach out now asking, "How did you get started?" And I always tell them the truth. I didn't plan it. I just said yes to myself when someone else said no. That's all it really was. Ethan said I wasn't worth living with, that I was too messy. And instead of proving him wrong out of spite, I simply proved myself right. By showing up, learning as I went, and turning rejection into reinvention. That's the lesson I carry with me now. Sometimes people leave not because you're flawed, but because they were never meant to stay. They walk out, and we think we're losing something. But in truth, we're making room. Room for growth, room for healing, room for something better. So if you've ever been made to feel like you're too much, or not tidy enough, or not whatever enough for someone else's standards, remember this. You're not the problem. You just haven't found the place where you get to set the standard. And when you do, they won't believe what you build.